Hey guys, my name is Rachel and welcome back to my channel. So before we get into today's video, I'm so excited to announce today's sponsor, NordPass. NordPass is a new generation password manager where security meets simplicity. It is developed by the same cybersecurity experts who built NordVPN. NordPass gives you a way to securely store, organize, and access your passwords and other sensitive information in a digital vault shielded by top-level encryption. To put it simply, instead of having to remember a million different passwords for every single one of your social media sites, your bank information, credit cards, Amazon shopping, etc., NordPass allows you to store all of that information using one password so that all of your sensitive information is in one secure place. NordPass will autosave and autofill all of your passwords to allow you to log into your accounts with ease. It will generate secure and complex passwords for you, allow you to shop online with ease as they remember all of your credit card details, and it can recognize sketchy websites so that you don't accidentally reveal your sensitive information to the wrong sketchy sites. I know that I am always forgetting my password, constantly having to use the forgot my password feature, which just takes up extra time. And then if you don't remember the security question that you came up with 3 years ago, or you don't know the password to your backup email, I know that I've sat down to check my email to start finding cases to research, or I sit down to do my schoolwork and there's just some account that I can't remember my password to, and then I spend an extra 10 or 15 minutes that could have been spent on being productive on trying to figure out what my password is. Or I just end up saving all of my passwords to the Notes app in my iPhone, which is completely unsecure and has actually caused me trouble in the past when someone actually hacked my Facebook account because I wasn't careful enough with my passwords. They went through and sent pretty much all of my friends on Facebook these weird messages that weren't actually from me, and people were like, why are you sending me that? And it just was a whole mess. And then on top of that, if someone is able to get your bank information or your Amazon information or anywhere that you online shop, it can be even more detrimental than that by them stealing your money or buying things for themselves with your money. It's just so much easier to make sure that you have all of your passwords secure and in one safe place that only you know about. With NordPass, you can just avoid all of this hassle and save all of your information in one place that is protected by cybersecurity experts. NordPass has user-friendly apps for Android and iOS, works on desktop apps for Windows, Mac, and Linux, plus browser extensions for Chrome, Firefox, Opera, and Edge. You might as well try it out because there's a 30-day risk-free guarantee if you find that it's not right for you, but trust me, I don't think that you're going to want to give it up once you start. The good news that I am absolutely ecstatic about for you guys is that my subscribers get an extra 50% off of NordPass by going to nordpass.com/Rachel or using the code Rachel. It's only $249 a month, plus you get an additional month for free. With the 30-day money-back guarantee, the extra month for free and 50% off, securing your passwords can cost less than your daily Starbucks coffee order. So head over to nordpass.com/Rachel or use code Rachel to start securing your data now. Okay, so with that being said, let's just get right into today's video. Today's video is a very old case that doesn't have a ton of information, but I actually stumbled across it on Twitter and I was immediately intrigued. I decided to go ahead and look into this case, and it honestly baffles me how all of this was able to happen and how it's still not solved to this day. I'm going to do my best to give you all of the information that I can find, but like I said, it's a pretty old case, and with a lot of these older cases, some of the information can get mixed up or mistold over time, and I only say that because I did see a couple of conflicting details, so I'm pretty much just going to include the information and that I was able to see over multiple sources. But with that being said, let's just get right into today's case. Today, we're going to be discussing the unsolved disappearance of Oliver Munson. Oliver Wendell Munson was born in 1945 and was 39 years old at the time that he went missing in 1983 in Catonsville, Maryland. Those around Oliver described him as being a very kind-hearted, recluse, low-key type of guy. He lived alone and he was known to mostly just keep to himself most of the time, never really going out or having social gatherings. He did have an occasional girlfriend who he would visit every now and then, but he spent most of his weekends just visiting his mother and his two brothers on the Eastern Shore, about an hour away from where he lived. Oliver graduated from the University of Maryland at East Shore and went on to become an industrial arts teacher at the Elliott City Middle School, which actually does not exist today. He was absolutely loved by his students because he would take them to go bowling or to go play softball a few times a week after school. In his spare time, Oliver loved working on old cars, and he had all of these old car parts scattered around his yard. Now, in January of 1983, he bought this classic used Datsun 240Z from a man named Dennis Watson. This was something that Oliver did very often. He would buy these old, rundown cars and then work on them to make them look nice again. But what Oliver didn't know was that Dennis was actually operating this sophisticated car theft operation. Basically, Dennis Watson had this car garage where he would sell cars that were stolen. He would steal these cars, dismantle them for parts, and then either sold the parts or the cars as a whole with fabricated documents. As all of this was going on, though, police were already on Dennis's trail and were already quietly investigating this car theft ring for weeks. By March 16th of 1983, police had closed in on Dennis Watson, raided his garage, and arrested him. In the garage, they found illegal fake car titles, partially dismantled parts, and stolen vehicle tags. Among the paperwork that police discovered was a record that had the name Oliver Munson. Initially, police weren't sure if Oliver was involved or not, or if he had just innocently purchased this car unknowing to the fact that it had actually been stolen 3 months prior. So of course, they went to Oliver's house and confiscated the car as evidence. But according to one of Oliver's good friends and coworkers, Oliver was actually really embarrassed that he was involved in this. Again, Oliver was this very easygoing, chill guy who was really easy to get along with and wasn't interested in getting into any sort of trouble. So after a while, police were pretty confident that he wasn't involved and actually asked him to testify against Dennis in court. Of course, Oliver was pretty nervous about testifying, but he agreed to do it because he basically figured that he didn't really have a choice. The trial was set for the following year, on February 16th, 1984. Now, 3 days before the trial, on February 13th, 1984, Oliver was seen by a neighbor pulling out of his driveway of his home on the 600 block of Orpington Road. He had on his usual touring cap that he wore every single day. He had his lunch bag with him, and his school notebook was sitting on the front passenger seat. And he started his 10-mile drive to work at the middle school. However, he never actually made it to school that day. Of course, Oliver not showing up to work immediately set off red alarms for his coworkers because he did not miss work. He'd actually only called in sick 4 times in the 15 years that he worked at Elliott City Middle School and never, not even once, missed a day of school without telling anyone. He was incredibly responsible and timely. Students and teachers at this point were thinking that he must have just been really sick and that maybe he was just laying there unconscious in his house. So his brother James actually stopped by his house to search for him. But of course, he wasn't there. By that next day, on February 14th, he was still nowhere to be found. so his family reported him missing to the Baltimore County Police. 3 days after he went missing, on February 16th, Oliver's 1980 Ford Pinto was found parked on Brayside Road in Catonsville, only about 2 blocks away from his home, but it was parked in the opposite direction of what he had taken to work. Now, the front right tire was flat, but when police inspected the tire, they determined that there was no leak in the tire. His touring cap, his lunch bag, and his school notebook all were still sitting in the front passenger seat of the car. Now, on the same day that Oliver went missing, another man named Hilton Solomon reported his car stolen. On the 27th, this car was actually found parked at the edge of Lincoln Park West in Baltimore. So police found the car and then released it back to Hilton. But after taking this car home, he decided to clean it. But as he was doing so, several concerning items were found. On the floor, he found 2 video store receipts with Oliver's first and last name on them, with red smudges on them. After discovering these, he called the police, who came over to further inspect the car. On the floor under the passenger front seat, police also found a small caliber shell casing and traces of blood on them. When the blood came back from testing the receipts, it came back as being O positive human blood. But we don't actually know whether that matches Oliver's blood type or not, because his blood type was not on record. And of course, at that time, we just didn't have the technology that we have today. And by now, the sample is too deteriorated to actually be tested. So we don't actually know for sure who this blood actually belonged to, but it is very likely that it did belong to Oliver. The day after all of this was found, police searched Lincoln Park and the areas surrounding to see if they could find any other clues relating to Oliver, but there was no trace of him anywhere. Of course, police immediately knew that foul play was involved and came up with a theory of how all of it went down. One of the detectives on the case, Detective Goodwin, theorized that someone had tampered with Oliver's front tire, causing it to go flat after he drove those 2 blocks. Then, after realizing that he had a flat tire, he pulled over to the side of the road to check on it. He thinks that after he decided to do so, 2, possibly 3 men pulled up behind him and offered to help. Then Oliver could have either gotten into the car by force or under the presumption that these men were going to give him a ride either to a tow truck or to a shop or something like that. Then, as he was sitting in the front passenger seat, someone in the back seat behind him harmed him by probably shooting him in the head and then buried him somewhere, possibly in Lincoln Park, which is where the stolen car was found. But again, police searched that area and didn't find any trace of him anywhere. So he pretty much could have been anywhere. Of course, investigators' main suspect was Dennis Watson. And during the investigation, detectives actually discovered that Oliver Munson wasn't the only man scheduled to testify against Dennis that had either turned up missing or died under suspicious circumstances. Now, 10 years earlier, in 1973, a 29-year-old Baltimore man named Clinton Glenn was found burned to death in a vehicle that was registered to Dennis Watson. And just like Oliver, Clinton was scheduled to testify against Dennis in an armed robbery case the very next day. Dennis was indicted for Clinton's murder by a grand jury, but there was yet another witness involved in this case that suddenly died, this time of a suspicious drug overdose. So the charges were dropped and it never went to trial, which is just absolutely crazy to me. Now, I know that this was almost 40 years ago, but it just seems so ridiculous. I mean, obviously, they didn't have the investigative technology that they have today. They probably didn't have the same protocols or nearly the amount of training that detectives have today. But a man who was connected to Dennis and was supposed to testify against him turns up burned in a car that belonged to Dennis. Then a man who was a witness involved in this case turns up deceased from an overdose. For some reason, instead of thinking that this points to Dennis even more, they thought, okay, well, now we don't have anyone to testify against this guy, so I guess Dennis didn't have anything to do with it. Instead of thinking that both of these men who Dennis was involved with and could have possibly gotten him in trouble ended up dying, and looking into him more. Again, I can't speak for the investigative work that was done in this case, and I don't know a ton about how investigations were done in general back then, but if they had looked into him even more or really tried to find a connection, then Oliver may still be alive today. I don't know the results of the armed robbery case, but we at least know that he wasn't in jail at the time that Oliver went missing, so I imagine that he either wasn't charged or that he wasn't given a very heavy sentence. But Oliver's body was never found. There was no hard evidence to even connect Dennis to his disappearance, and no proof that he had ever even died. Some of Oliver's friends even speculated that he just left. We know that this is a very low-key guy who spent a lot of time in solidarity. People thought that maybe he could have just skipped town and started a new life somewhere else, but of course, we know that this is very unlikely, and detectives in this case would agree. He was close to his family, and he really cared about the friends that he did have. He was the type of guy who didn't have a ton of friends, but the people that he did choose to involve himself with were people that he genuinely cared about. There isn't anything pointing to him running away, and again, he didn't have any reason to. Now, despite Oliver not being able to testify in the auto theft case against Dennis Watson, who was 35 years old at this point, city prosecutors were still able to convict him. He was sentenced to serve 10 years, but only actually served 5 years of his sentence, which again is just a complete slap in the face to all of the victims that could be connected to him. Dennis was never charged with anything in relation to the 3 men who he was involved with that went missing or died. There wasn't enough evidence to even take Dennis to court, so he basically just got off scot-free because he was good at what he did. Now, at the time that I last saw, he was awaiting parole to go on trial for the auto theft related to Hilton Solomon, and I tried to find out if he ever did go to trial, if he got convicted, if he spent any time in jail, if he's still in jail now, or, if he committed any more crimes. But I wasn't able to find anything updated, even though, I searched his name, I searched this case, I wasn't able to find anything. Since then, this case is completely stagnant and is just sitting on the shelves in the cold case unit, hoping that someday someone will come forward, because that's pretty much the only way that this case is going to be solved at this point. There are multiple people who know what happened to Oliver, and maybe now that it's been so many years, maybe someone will come forward. The people involved are pretty old at this point, and again, I don't know if they're still alive, what their life is like now, but because they're so old and it's been so many years since this all happened, it gives me hope that we may still be able to find out what happened to him. Maybe someone will see this video and be reminded of what they did almost 40 years ago. Maybe someone will see this and remember something that they didn't realize that they remembered until they saw his face again. Maybe someone will even admit to what they did on their deathbed. Again, I'm not sure if Dennis Watson is even alive, but maybe someday he'll come forward. Like I said, there hasn't been any movement in this case, and people have different theories about what could have happened to Oliver. But throughout the investigation, Dennis Watson is really the only person that police had ever looked into. It is believed that other men are involved as well, but We don't know the identities of any of them. Oliver's body was never found and the blood was never able to be tested, but most people believe that Oliver is buried out there somewhere in Lincoln Park. By 1985, the Munson family requested that Oliver be declared legally dead as a victim of presumed homicide. Then in 1994, 10 years after Oliver's disappearance, the show Unsolved Mysteries aired a reenactment of his disappearance, hoping that it could create some new movement in his case and spread his story. But as far as I know, nothing useful came out of it other than, of course, people learning about his tragic story and at least getting a glimpse into a man whose life was selfishly cut short, allegedly by a man who just didn't want to get involved for the crimes that he was involved with. As for theories, there aren't a ton. Obviously, the first theory is that Dennis Watson was involved or that some of his associates were involved with harming Oliver. The other theories could possibly be him running off. Now, obviously, police have mostly looked into Dennis Watson, and most people believe that he is the one responsible. But I guess if we consider other theories, maybe it's possible that Oliver knew that he had to testify in this court case and was very nervous about it and was afraid that something would happen to him. He could have been afraid that Dennis Watson would retaliate after he testified, so maybe he ran off and went somewhere new because of that. Maybe he ran off for some other reason and the timing was just really coincidental. I obviously don't think that that's true. I think that if for whatever reason he did run off, it would have been because he was afraid to testify against Dennis. Maybe Dennis had made threats. Maybe Dennis had told him, if you don't, disappear, then I will make you disappear. So then he disappeared. But at this point, I genuinely do believe that Dennis Watson was the one who harmed him, and I think that most people would agree. It's, again, incredibly unlikely that Oliver just ran off because he wanted to. And if he did run off, I do think that it's because of Dennis either threatening him or just being afraid. But the evidence does not point to him running off. It points to him being harmed, especially because there were receipts with his name on it that had red smudges on them that were human blood. And there were small calibers in the car that was stolen at Lincoln Park. This case has affected so many people, and it still resonates with people who knew him to this day. I know that some of his students still, to this day, ask about Oliver and ask if anyone has figured out what happened to him, which is just so amazing to me that this man had such an impact on these kids' lives that they haven't stopped thinking about him even 40 years later. Oliver's old home does have new owners, but one of his closest friends still holds on to his house key to this day, hoping that someday he can give it back to him, even though he knows that he most likely will never see his friend ever again. Oliver Wendell Munson was 39 years old when he disappeared on February 13th, 1984 in Catonsville, Maryland. He is described as being a black male with black hair and brown eyes, standing at 5 feet 10 inches tall, weighing 160 pounds at the time that he went missing. He would be 75 years old today. If you have any information regarding Oliver's disappearance, I ask that you contact the Baltimore County Police Department at 410-887-3943. So that is all I have for today's video. I know that it's a shorter case, but I still believe that all of this time later, Oliver's case deserves to be told. He did not deserve to have his life cut short the way that it was, all because of his hobby of working on cars ended up with him being in the wrong place at the wrong time, dealing with the wrong people. But now I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that Dennis is responsible for Oliver's disappearance? Do you think it was people involved with Dennis? Do you believe that he left and started his life over somewhere new? Or do you think that something else could be at play that we didn't even mention? Please let me know down below. If you liked this video, please make sure to leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to head over to nordpass.com/Rachel or use code Rachel to get 50% off of NordPass and get an extra month free. You will be so relieved when you finally have a service that protects all of your sensitive information and keeps it in one place. Also, don't forget to follow my Twitter and Instagram. Both will be linked down below. If you have absolutely any case suggestions, please make sure to email them to me at RachelShannonCases@gmail.com. Pretty much every single case that I cover is directly from that email, and I look at every single case suggestion that I get. So please do not hesitate to send those suggestions over. With that, I hope you guys have a great week, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.